Hi guys, welcome back to Sim Racing and Virtual Reality on the Gamer Muscle YouTube channel. In this video, we're jumping into RaceRoomRacing Experance with the Oculus Rift. So, we've popped on the Rift and you'll be glad to know everything does work pretty much the same regardless of if you're using a Rift or a Vive. Of course, we've got both a Rift and a Vive, so we've had the chance to actually drive it with both. And yeah, it's pretty much comparable with either or either, so no one's really missing out here. Now, the reason why Sector 3 are only doing it in OpenVR and not doing native Oculus support is because Raceroom is based on DirectX 9 technology, so they can't really get the Oculus SDK working with the game, as it requires at least DirectX 10 as a base of the game for it to work with it. The only things really that you have to be aware of when playing Raceroom with the Rift is you don't load up the game using the beta version of OpenVR, because if you do, you'll get all like double vision and crazy stuff going on, and believe me, it's not very comfortable. But so long as you've got the standard version of OpenVR, you just put the launch parameter dash VR in. Whoa, we bit too much brake there. You put the launch parameter dash VR and then space, and I use -2. I use 2.0, which is the super sampling value. Yes, with that, everything seems to run really smooth. Now, Raceroom isn't quite as efficient in VR as, say, Assetto Corsa or iRacing, but it runs more than good enough now for you to have the graphics not on the lowest of settings and still be able to play it in a fully functional way in VR, even if it does lean a little bit on asynchronous space warp or asynchronous reprojection. And if you are wondering, try and hit this a bit sideways there. If you are wondering about what settings to use and you're just considering Raceroom for the first time, I've just put together a video that goes through the graphics settings and what settings will allow you to get the best visuals from the game at a minimum load on your computer, basically allowing you to put things on something that will look nice but also run well in VR. We've also put together a video that introduces you to how to set up your steering wheel, your pedals and your force feedback, and goes through all the different settings. So if you're literally coming to this for the first time, maybe because it's got VR support and you like driving simulators in VR, you can go through our videos. I'll put in the video description and it should get you going. And the nice thing with RaceRoomRacing Experance is, of course, that it's free to play, so you can just jump into it. You can try any of the cars, but it is limited to which track you can actually drive those on without buying them. But you can check all the content out and see if your computer's fast enough to run it, and see if it's something that you want to actually buy into. And then if you do want to buy into it, you can either buy stuff bit by bit if you only want to drive a couple of the cars, but then you can, if you want to go all in, you can spend about $60 or so and just unlock the entirety of the game, which is probably the best way of doing it if you know that you're going to get the gameplay out of it, because the cost can mount up quite a lot if you buy stuff bit by bit as opposed to just buying it in one go. So here we go. So nice playing this in VR though. And you say this playing it with the Vive as well. You just get the positional awareness of where things are, what's going on around you, and the ability to see the camber of the track, the details, and it just places you inside the car. I mean, we are sat, for all intents and purposes, from my perspective, I am sat inside this KTM Crossbow. I can admire the cockpit details, and I can admire the other vehicles as they drive into me and I drive into them. It's just absolutely superb. Whoa! You look at the little dash on the right there, shows our gear, the actual in-car dash, instead of having to use UI elements. Though we do have one of the default UI elements on, which tells you what gear you're in, what RPM you're going at, and tyre information as well as fuel. But generally I think in VR it's better to actually turn off as many of the UI elements as possible. You'll also notice that we're using I'm not sure if it's visible on the video, but we're using a H pattern shifter, and again, I think one of the big worries people had with VR was can you use a H-pattern shifter? Well, you forget where it is, but you know, when you're driving a real car, you don't look down at your gear shifter. If you've got a sim rig or wheel stand pro, once you know where your shifter is, it's just there. You just rest your hand on it. So really, really fantastic. And I'm actually really glad that Raceroom not only works with the Vive now, but also works with the Rift. And I think it's really important with VR for developers that support VR devices, or you know, if someone's doing VR support with a game, it's really important that it works on all headsets. And you know, it's one of the advantages of open VR is that though it's not as good as native Oculus in terms of raw performance, at least it works essentially with all the headsets by default. Whereas if the developer only supports the Rift, like with what Assetto Corsa has done, you have to use Revive and do some patching and you know, a bit of fiddling to get things working. And then you also find that the scale doesn't completely go across. But whoa, we've been taken out. In this case, using OpenVR with the Rift, the scale all seems spot on, and you know, it's pretty much identical playing on a Rift or a Vive. I don't think you're not losing out anything. So really, really good, and really good news for those of you that just have a Rift and wanted to jump into this game. Whoa, we're being shunted around. I've got the AI on 105 and they're absolutely destroying me in this car. This has been the this weekend. You've probably seen the other Raceroom videos we put out with driving the 90s DTM car, and again the AI was destroying us. I'll have to blame it on something. I think I blame it on the talking and driving. That's probably the easiest thing to blame it on. Can't really blame the equipment because we're using a TSPC Racer and a TH8A shifter, which is both really nice input devices. So we can't blame the equipment. We'll have to blame the talk and driving. Now we come around this corner. I'm not sure how clear that is in the video, but setting the race time to sunset, and you get this really nice lighting as you come around the corners, and it really does light up the cockpit, and you really notice the coloration of the sky in VR. And another thing you really notice in VR with Raceroom is just how densely detailed the actual track details are. It's really full. You know, they have stands. In this case, for some reason, there's no spectators. They've all gone home. I might have turned the settings down a bit too much. But you've got stands full of people normally, if they've not gone home because we've bored them to death with our bad driving. But you then have nice animations, and the actual trees and surrounding environment in Raceroom looks really nice and detailed and full, more so than a lot of other games, which is again, it just in VR especially, it just really draws you into the game. I think the more objects you have, the more you have to sort of keep track of with your mind. Though, you know, when you're obviously focusing on lap time, you're so focused on the track and just pushing the car to its limit, you kind of zone in a little bit. But when you're cruising and when you're just enjoying the game, I think it's nice to have those details on, and for developers to put those details in the game. Oh, this crossbow can be a real handful. Fantastic fun vehicle to drive. Again, using the H pattern is really fun, but this vehicle is really responsive to your throttle, lift off, oversteer, really nimble, really nice to sort of chuck into corners, and just a sort of really nice driver's car. And Raceroom actually is in the process of adding the GT4 version of this crossbow, which is basically the same vehicle, but I think it's slightly more tuned and has a roof on it. So that'll be interesting to drive in VR as well. Let's see if we can drive a little bit faster here by shutting up a little bit, and you can listen to the car over the sound of my clicking devices. This is really nice when you go around the corners and you see the shadow of your vehicle in VR moving around on the floor in front of you, which again, that's another thing you don't tend to notice on a 2D screen, is your actual presence in the environment. In VR, it's all magnified. VR also does a really good job of magnifying how the car moves relative to the road, so it helps explain certain car characteristics that you might otherwise miss driving in 2D, or it certainly makes them more obvious. So the actual lateral movement of the vehicle as you throw it into a corner and how the vehicle shuffles around some of the corners is just really nice and noticeable in VR. As we test the suspension, it's important to test the suspension. The team need the data. It's always good to drive off the circuit at least once per race. There's the roller coaster. Driving sim developers should put that roller coaster into the VR version of a game. It's a special feature. Oh no! We see that, we totally messed that corner up. The AI pushing us from behind, but the cars have a really nice controllable amount of slip to them now in Raceroom. In the past, Raceroom did feel a little bit narrow and a little bit soggy. Sort of spongy, soggy in response. The vehicles didn't seem quite as tight, but now, since a while back actually, they did a massive improvement to the force feedback. But the new vehicles, any vehicle that's come into the sim in the last sort of 6 months, has been a lot tighter, has far more believable tyres in my opinion to what the older vehicles have in them. They're less forgiving in terms of the amount of grip you've got before you start doing bigger slides, but they're more forgiving in that you can still recover those slides. So it's a mixture of increasing the punishment but not making it so that punishment is a death sentence. Gone into that corner side, we've got another car making a move on our left. You just see him in the mirror. Now, unfortunately the mirrors aren't full 3D or positional like in iRacing or Live for Speed, but they're kind of like little TV screens, but they do the job, you know. It's actually almost a miracle that they managed to get VR working in Raceroom Racing Experience, to be fair. I think one of the big things is that over the next year or so they're going to move Raceroom from the original Gmotor core graphics engine and their improvements to the graphics engine to an Unreal Engine base, and that will make VR a lot smoother. Look at that, we're right in the stands here. We're sort of floating above the stands. I'm floating in my sim rig above the track, and you can see all the cars driving around. Absolutely superb. But there you go. So in conclusion, yes, Raceroom Racing Experience does work with the Oculus Rift pretty much as well, if not the same as it does with the Vive. The only thing you have to watch out for is that you make sure you load Steam VR not in beta mode but in the standard mode, and then just use the go to the set launch options and use dash VR space, and I use 2.0, but if you've got a slower computer you might need to use a smaller number. But absolutely fantastic. Until the next video, or if you've got any questions, drop any questions in the comments. If you've got any questions or comments, I'll try and answer them as soon as possible and help you through. But until the next video, subscribe and like, and goodbye everybody.